Hello friends, welcome back if you've been away, because I have. I'm just back from Bali. Back in the studio, the loft in my house. I'm pleased to say that, as always, this podcast is brought to you by Apparel. is a men's clothing brand that wants to encourage more fellas to do yoga. Yoga's in their DNA and it's reflected in everything they do, from being kinder to the environment by using sustainable and recycled fabrics to their recycled paper packaging and focus on men's health. Their fabrics are eco-certified because we have to start looking after the planet in every way possible that we can. So if you go to ohmme.com/#TYLP and check out their full range of eco activewear, you can get yourself 15% off with the promo code Kevin. So go along, you can pick out, for example, the Atom shorts, which are made from recycled polyester. Put in the promo code Kevin and you get your 15% off. Just make sure when you go, it's ohmme.com/#TYLP. This podcast is also brought to you by 108 Asana Yoga Sequencing Cards by Yogaroo, making your sequencing simple and effective, helping to bridge that gap between the studio classes and your home practice. You can find out all kinds of stuff on these cards, like alignment cues, level guides, anatomy coding, and all the translations from English to Sanskrit. Just go along to yogaroo.ie, use the promo code Kevin to get a special 10% off your set of cards. And last but not least, this podcast is brought to you by Small Changes here in Dublin, Ireland. Local, organic whole food store doing good things for the community and looking after the environment, as always. Actually, the guest today, funnily enough, is Peadar Rice, who is the head honcho down at Small Changes. But I normally, when I go in to get my groceries from them, when you have a bit of small talk, when you're buying your tomatoes, you can't really go into a lot of detail about life, particularly when you're in a queue. So it was nice to actually sit down with Peadar and find out more about him. And he's experienced some difficulties in his life with health, like we all do sometimes. And he left an industry that wasn't serving him, that he wasn't happy in, and decided to start something that made a bit more of a difference for him and for the people around him. So I hope you enjoy his story. And without further ado, here's Peadar. Hey Peadar, how's it going?
Not too bad, Kev.
Thanks for coming.
Not at all. Thanks for the invite.
Is this your first ever podcast?
It's my second.
Your second? What was your first one?
No.
I thought we gone.
Book of Leaves was my first podcast. We recorded it about a month and a half ago.
Okay. And what was that about?
That was basically just a chat about sustainability, how we as individuals can have an impact on our communities and on the environment.
It's called Book of Leaves.
Book of Leaves, yeah.
Is it an Irish podcast?
It's an Irish podcast. Can't remember her name, but she's just recently started podcasting. So I was her second podcast. Interview, yeah.
How long did that go on for?
That went on for around 40 odd minutes, I suppose.
Okay, so you're kind of proactive by this stage now.
Oh yeah.
So you said to me that there's no. So to give, I suppose, people some context. So I've been going to your store, Small Changes, for a while now because I moved to Glasnevin a couple of years ago, and I made a conscious effort to try to eat more organic, try to eat less meat, try to reduce my waste, and also I like to get involved in things that seem more local. I already use Amazon and some things we use for convenience, which we just use something for convenience. But I think anything we can do to actually to encourage more community is definitely a good idea, and that's how I know you. And the reason I wanted to speak with you is because last week was Earth Day, and with Earth Day and our planet being on TV, and all, it seems like we're becoming more and more conscious of sustainability and our carbon footprint. So I do want to speak to you about that. But as I said, is there anything you don't want to talk about? As always, I say to all my guests, we can cut it out. But when you came in here into the house, you came in on your bike, and I'm interested to know about you, Peadar. You as a person. Who are you? No, well, so I want to get to know. So I want to talk about. Firstly, you don't drive.
No, not.
Do you want me asking why?
Yeah, I was 2021. I borrowed, or rather, my friend borrowed his mother's car without telling her, and we decided to go for a spin. And I hadn't really driven much at that point, and I took the wheel and I hit a patch of oil on the road, and the car skidded and went up the embankment and into a field. So that gave me quite a fright. Not as much as a fright as his mother gave me when we went back and obviously told her what had happened. But ever since, I've been incredibly nervous about driving. I haven't done it in a long time, but for a while I used to take driving lessons. And the idea, or the thinking I had behind that, was that it would get me comfortable again. But I'm 42 now. I'm not driving, and I won't. At this point, I don't think it's something. I don't think the fear of driving, or the sense of insecurity I have. I can sit in a car, a passenger, quite enjoy being driven around. But taking control of a car is not something.
Have you thought? I've been in contact with a couple of hypnotherapists. Oh, I think I was telling you about this in the shop. I'm going to move the mic a little bit close to your face. 1 second.
Wow, that is close.
So just they say in the podcast world, eat the mic. That's not
okay.
So yeah,
Right.
You got to imagine like it's someone's ear and you're speaking into the ear. So it sounds a bit creepy, but I've been speaking to a couple of hypnotherapists in the last few weeks. I know it sounds like a bit of a tangent, and I've, for my own personal reasons, have you considered hypnotherapy? No.
To be quite honest, I don't have an urge to drive. My life is such that I don't need to drive. My wife doesn't drive, and our life, I suppose, our lifestyle has revolved around cycling.
Mm-hmm. So
we're very fortunate in that we live very close to the city centre. If I get the lights, it takes me under 8 minutes to get from our house to the shop on the bike. So
fair enough. Well, and when I was, before you came here, because whenever I meet you in the shop, obviously you're there working, and it's quite transactional. We say, "How's it going?" and it's very much small talk. But I was reading a little bit about you before you came today, and that you used to have a proper job in inverted commas. So why did you leave your proper job and do what you're doing now? I'm using the word proper as a joke.
Yeah, and I'm laughing.
What was your job before?
Prior to that, or prior to opening my first shop in 2010, my background was in construction. I would have started just as a labourer on sites, and then I moved into the management side of things, purchasing, stock control, and site management. And I was there from the beginning of the boom in construction here. Rode the wave. It was it was a very unsatisfying experience. It was a means to an end. It was granted, it was a very well paid job, but I saw an awful lot of things happen which didn't sit well with me. There was a lot of, I suppose, a lot of unethical behaviour. And at that time, I had a very young family. We had a mortgage. So whilst it was a job which I wasn't at all happy with, it was incredibly long hours. There was a lot of travelling involved. Most days I would leave the house at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the earliest I would get home would have been maybe 8, half 8 in the evening time. So, as I said, it wasn't something that I enjoyed, but circumstances dictated that, you know, I had to suck it up, I guess. And I've always been interested in the environment. I would have always had a community focus, or, you know, so the job that I was in, or the last position that I had in the construction industry, didn't allow that at all. Mm-hmm. And then in late 2009, the company I worked for went bust. Okay. So there would have been quite a lot of people who lost their jobs, who were in a very similar position to myself. I had always worked. I had never been in a position where I was out of employment. After my leaving cert, I decided I wasn't going to go to college. So suddenly to have no job, to have, or to feel as if there was no opportunity for another job, was quite scary. A lot of my friends emigrated. I didn't want to emigrate, and so I soon came to the conclusion that to stay in Ireland, I'd have to create my own employment, and that's how the first shop came to be in Gorey and down in Wexford.
But why this type of business?
I've had quite a lot of health problems. Over the years, I've had cancer a few times, and the first time it happened, I guess it was a real eye opener. It made me look at my diet, my lifestyle. So when I did realise that I would have to create my own employment, it was going to be it was going to be, you know, in this area, in this field. So that's.
And do you think that that diet and lifestyle was a massive contributor?
Hugely.
Really?
Absolutely. I'm not saying that it wouldn't have happened. But certainly the lifestyle that I had in the lead up to when I was first diagnosed was extremely unhealthy. Long hours, poor diet, huge stress. So, as I said, I can't say that brought it on, but I certainly think that it sped up the.
Some people believe in like fasting or juice diets, or simply like moving to an environment where they're happier for treating cancer. What type of treatment did you find was most effective?
For me personally, what was most effective was looking inwards and looking at my mental state. And for the first time in, I actually doubt as if I had ever done it before. But I began to listen to my body. My body was unhappy, and the sickness was a manifestation of that, I believe. And I suppose I listened to what my body was saying, and in return, it gave me a huge understanding of my mental strength, and taught me a huge number of life lessons. It would have been nice if I could have learned those life lessons another way, but what I've learned about myself has been phenomenal. Absolutely.
Were you like, before, when you were working in the construction industry, were you aware of sustainability? Were you into that at all? Was that always something that interested you?
Yeah, I was, and time again, when we would tender for projects or become involved in projects, I always tried to have sustainability at the forefront of the project. And, I would go to meetings after meetings after meetings, and the end result was, yeah, that's a nice presentation. You make some great points, but the most important thing is the bottom line. So we're here to maximize our profits, regardless of what effects our non-sustainable methods will incur. So it was very, very disheartening, I guess.
And when I proposed to you, when I made the proposal of coming in to do this podcast in the shop, I said, Peadar, I'm looking for somebody to come in and to my podcast and perhaps talk about climate change, sustainability. And then when I asked you about it, you said, "Oh, I'd be happy to do that." And then you started talking to me about trying to get arrested.
Yeah.
So what's that all about?
Couldn't even get arrested
Couldn't even
when
get
I tried.
arrested.
Yeah, there was an Extinction Rebellion rally on Good Friday in Dublin. And my understanding was that we were all going to emerge en masse in the city centre of Dublin with the aim of getting arrested. Yeah. Because I feel very passionate. About my idea is that the time for marches and speeches and signing petitions has passed. Yeah. That the only way that real change is going to happen is if we step outside of our comfort zone, if we engage in civil disobedience, and we do it on such a scale that the political system has no option but to actually have a sea change in their approach to climate change and tackling climate change. So, as I said, I thought we were going to get arrested. I was prepared to be arrested. But come 6 o'clock, everyone decided to go home. So that was...
Did they just bottle it?
I don't know. I don't know the organisers. I'm not involved in any of the committees. But what I took away from it was that nobody had any intention of putting themselves in the position where they would be arrested. I spoke very briefly to a steward, or I imagine that the person I was speaking to was a steward. He had a high-vis vest on. But I asked him why everybody was going home, and the answer I was given was, we don't have the numbers. And he said that we don't have the numbers like they have in London. And at that point in London, the demonstrations had been going on for 5 days. I think over 800 people had been arrested. and the Metropolitan Police had at that point had actually stopped arresting people because the system couldn't cope. So to hear that person say, well, we don't have, we're going home because we don't have the numbers in London was very disheartening. London being a multiple, or has 10 times the population of Dublin. Of course, we weren't ever going to have any crowds approaching the size that they had in London.
Yeah.
And I was told that, maybe the next time they do something, they'll have a bigger crowd. So it just seemed to go back to the same old, nothing changes. So, yeah, it was very, very, very disheartening.
With climate change, though, I think that people... Okay, so I'm sure some people's hearts are in the best place when it comes to helping with climate change. But I do think that some actions like reducing your use of cotton buds or whatever, we don't know. We think that these little things are going to make a huge difference, and they will make a difference. But I think when we start to think about the changing things from a political level, it becomes too abstract. People can't understand why what's happening at that level and what difference they can make. But someone could easily shop with you instead of another market, and that's something that's more accessible, less commitment, less potentially risky for them. But so could you, like, from, I suppose, in layman's terms, give us an insight as to what you see is happening at a political level in Ireland regarding, or not happening, shall I say, in regards to climate change?
Well, there really isn't anything happening climate change in the political system here in Ireland. What we have had in the past, we've had Enda Kenny was the Taoiseach at the time, was over in Paris, made a big hoo-ha of, we're fantastic, we've signed, the IPCC treaty on climate change. But then a couple of days later, he was talking up the promotion of Irish agriculture and how we were going to be ramping up production. There really isn't any political party who is grasping climate change. And I firmly believe the reason why that's not happening is because politics, and I can only speak about politics in Ireland, because that's all I really know about. But politics here seems to be very much about the immediate gains. I'll do whatever it takes to get re-elected. So I look after, you've got a pothole, or you need some sort of forms filled out, or I'll attend all the various funerals, so my face will be seen. If our politicians were told that you had 6 months or a year to fix climate, to come up with some sort of solutions to tackle climate change, they would do it. But climate change, or the effects of climate change, it's something which is very gradual. We're not going to, probably in our lifetime, we're not going to see the full effects of climate change. But it's the generation after that, and the generation after that, generation after that. So there's an unwillingness to tackle it because there's no gain. There's no electoral return on that. Because to tackle climate change, there has to be a sea change in our lifestyle, which is going to everybody.
Like what?
Well, the way in which our society conducts itself has to change. You know, our society is predicated on mass consumerism, on constant growth. You know, year in, year out, you hear, or, you know, there's various government reports released saying, you know, we predict this year's growth is going to be 3% or 4% or whatever. And we can't, at some point, you know, we're going to hit a brick wall. Because we can't continue on a planet of finite resources. You can't expect to continuously grow.
So if someone's sitting at home or driving the car, listening to this now, an Irish person, what could they, apart from visiting Small Changes, just throw that in there.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, of course. What could they do from a political point of view to make a difference, do you think?
I suppose the most the approach I've always taken is that if you want to see a change in society, regardless of any sort of a change, you have to create the situation where at a political level it can't be ignored. And the best way to do that is to start small, start in your community, build it at grassroots, and look to other communities, other towns, other villages, other suburbs, and see if what you're doing in your own locality, if that can be replicated all over the country, and create a movement at a ground level whereby, you know, if your local TD or your local councillor sees that, oh Jesus, you know, there's actually quite a lot of people involved here. You know, if I get involved in this, you know, I may actually get some votes here, you know.
Yeah, the thing is though, the problem is with the political system is it's a popularity contest. So the person who sees that, the candidate who says, oh, if I market myself as you know, a green warrior, then people will want to back me, as opposed to I mean, you can't overthrow the system, or can you? I don't know, but maybe there's a better way. If for example, by the way, I should ask, if you get arrested, does that mean you've got a criminal record? No.
If you're brought to court, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if you're brought to court
and charged with an offence.
So let's say, for example, you a substantial amount of you did get arrested that day. What would do you reckon be the impact?
Well, you see, the whole thinking, or at least my understanding, is that the thinking behind this movement is that if you create, or if you tie up the system so much, you cause so much inconvenience, that, and you keep repeating it. So you get arrested, you either get released, or you're brought up in front of court. But then you get arrested again, and you continue doing it.
Yeah.
Until the system can't actually cope anymore. So you would have, for instance, the police system, the court system, the traffic system.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You can't be ignored then.
You can't, because what is happening is that all the resources are being diverted to tackling the movement. So, guards, rather than doing their normal business, are, they're being moved into the cities or the towns where the protests, because they're there to police the protest.
And if you from the venture you've made and you're making with Small Changes, and the fact you're open, can I say you're opening new premises?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, cool. Like it'll be 5 minutes walk from my house, which is fantastic. But this is exciting because I actually went down to an eco village in Clough Jordan in Tipperary with my missus like a few months ago, and thinking about eventually living that way, but financial reasons I can't yet. But do you see these movements happening more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose when I first started Small Changes in 2010, it was seen as a very, the only people you're ever going to see in your shop are, hippies, lentil eaters, people who don't wash, which wasn't true, by the way. But since then, the interest has grown across all demographics, all age groups, all nationalities. But what gives me the most hope is that there's a huge amount of our customers are quite young. I'm not that old, but
whippersnappers.
The whippersnappers. You would have students still in secondary school who are very, very engaged. You would have college students, people in their 20s. I see young people who are far more engaged than I ever was at their age. I suppose the information or the science has become so proven that it's impossible to ignore, and that the younger people realize that their future is at stake. That the politicians who are sitting in the Dáil, by the time the young people get to the age of, the average age of a sitting TD, it would be disastrous if things don't change by then.
And I think that because people, I think now we have access to information like we never have done before, and living in an island that was, society was essentially at one stage run by the church, and even my mum's generation, and definitely her mum's generation, there would be the people up there, the nurses, or not the nurses, sorry, the priests and stuff. They knew best. The government knew best. But now with podcasts, with social media, everyone has a voice. So young people are able to get information they couldn't have got before. And I think, like we were saying downstairs, when you're watching late night TV or these politicians on TV, you can see through it because they're talking to you in a way that it seems artificial. And it's the same with people like when a politician is talking, you think like, who are you? Like this is an act, and I think just because now the media we consume is more like this style, more relaxed. Young people pick up on that, and it doesn't resonate with them. Another thing about as well information is that things like our planet, that has made a massive difference because it's educational, but in an entertaining way, in a beautiful way. It's art. Whereas in school, if someone is telling you something, and there's no colour and there's no sound, it's hard for you to take it in. And I think that I've learnt so much watching that program that it's little things like this is something that people don't think about. If you live on a high ground, you're not on a coastal city. Some people think like, oh well, I'm fine if it floods, then it's only the low-lying land that's going to be affected. But you forget that most cities are built next to rivers. So if the sea levels rise, the rivers will rise as well. So if like what apart from obviously having small changes, what do you do on a day-to-day basis and not having a car as well to reduce your carbon footprint? Because I need some tips.
Right. I suppose on a personal level, we will be very mindful, both my wife and I, we will be very mindful of food waste. So I'm very fortunate in that my wife is a very good cook and she loves cooking. And she finds it, I don't know how she does it, because she would come in from work and start cooking, whereas I wouldn't have the energy. But she finds it as a great de-stressor. So the more stressed my wife is, the better we eat. But we would be very conscious of food waste. So we would, rather than one big shop, we would shop maybe 3 or 4 times a week. We would just shop for what we want for that particular night's dinner. Now, obviously, I'm conscious that we don't have. It's just myself and my wife at home, so it's easier for us to do that, I guess. So I suppose that would be one thing we would do on a daily basis.
In the States, 40% of food goes to waste. That is outrageous.
It's staggering when you think of, aside from the environmental impact of such a huge amount of waste. When you think of the amount of poverty, the amount of children who go to school without a breakfast, who go to sleep hungry, it's staggering,
But another thing I think about is clothes. I've got a wardrobe down there full of this. I forget what the term is, but it's like cheap. These companies, these retail companies, these shops that sell clothing for like a t-shirt for £5.
Yeah.
I forget what the actual that type of retail is called, but it's essentially like low priced, low quality retail or fashion. And you think in your mind, I'm getting a great deal here. I'm getting this t-shirt for £5.
Yeah.
But you know that it's not going to last probably, and then you end up having 10 of them that are just. We don't think about the what's happening behind the scenes, where that goes, and I also think because living in cities, we become so detached as to where our waste goes.
Yeah.
And that for me, there's not just the kind of the health of our planet, but there's also the health of our society. Because I go into Lidl and all these other shops, and I say to the person behind the checkout, "How you doing?" And it's like they're just pinging you through, getting it done and dusted as quick as possible. And that's a terrible way to live life. Like the art of conversation or small talk is going. People are afraid of that intimacy.
Yeah, well, that's a huge thing about the shop, in that we're not. I suppose the model behind big supermarkets is get people in, get people out, get them to spend as much as you can, and just keep everything going. Whereas the approach that we take in the shop is that it's not just a shop. We picked the location in Drumcondra for a very salient reason, but it's everybody is welcome to come in and have a chat, and we encourage that. We've got 2 checkouts, so there'll never be an express checkout. You will always have to engage with a human. But it's very important that we don't lose the social interaction. I can't imagine living in a society where you don't say hello to your neighbour. From a very early age, my granny, she would bring us out walking, and she would encourage us always to say hello and smile to whoever we met on the street. And she would always say that, you know, saying hello and a smile takes absolutely no effort on your part. But the person receiving that smile and receiving that hello may well not have spoken to anybody for that whole day, or maybe living on their own, maybe feeling unwell or lonely or whatever. And, you know, something simple as somebody else saying hello, you know, validating your existence, it's a tremendous benefit, you know, and if we lose that, it'll be very sad.
What I've realized, I completely agree. What I've realized is that when I don't engage is when I'm often not feeling good about myself, and I'll just have my headphones in, and I don't feel like I want to be vulnerable to people in that environment, because you know, so I was listening to a really interesting podcast talking about society, modern society, and how we live, and how people nowadays. And the one examples they gave was, if a woman was breastfeeding, she wouldn't consult the local granny who's, you know, done that, who's had a bunch of kids. She would hire a lactation consultant. And it's not because it's that people don't want to feel like they're being a burden on other people. And that is it's like it's something that we're. I mean, obviously, I love technology, and it's brilliant because we're using technology now. But I think those little interactions you said, the older person perhaps in the shop, you know, a lot of people live on their own, particularly older people, and that is maybe their only time to interact.
Yeah, and you know, technology it's fantastic. You know, the advantages and the advances that have come about in such a short period, because of technology, it's amazing. But there's a huge remove, and I think, you know, we look at elderly people who wouldn't be as engaged in technology as we are. So sometimes we forget about, or we undervalue elderly people and their position in society. You know, like that you know, when you were talking about breastfeeding, and somebody who has, you know, raised however many children and probably breastfed them, the wealth of knowledge that person would have. So rather than engaging with that person, you know, you might go on and Google and Wikipedia and consult experts and whatnot. Like, there is one of our staff members, she won't mind me saying this, but she is elderly. And for all her working life, all her adult life, you know, she worked. And she was in the civil service, and she reached retirement age and was told she had to take retirement. And she fought it, and she was given a year's extension, and then at the end of the year, she was told, no, sorry, this is it. You have to go. So she couldn't understand why, you know, she was perfectly capable of continuing to work and wanted to work. And here she was being told, you're of no use anymore, you're too old, so, you know, kind of sling your hook. So she works in the shop now, and customers love her, you know. You know, the chats that, you know, that she would have with customers, it's just phenomenal. And you know, she's a fantastic asset, you know. Like the knowledge that she would bring, you know, to the shop it's brilliant, you know.
Yeah, but it's people are now outsourcing those interactions or those services, like that example about a lactation consultant. I mean, in Japan, for example, it used to be a case of old people were worshipped. They were they had all the wisdom, all the knowledge, but now in Japan, less and less. The society is changing through technology, and people are. Japan is a fascinating culture because it's almost like where we're going as a society. Less and less people are having kids. Less and more people are population is getting older, and we're becoming more individualized, if that's the word. And I think, therefore, that reinforces this feeling of this is not our planet. So I did it. I took it 180. I took it all the way around there, Peadar. See that? But this is not our planet, and when you wake up in the morning, if the first light you see is the glare from your phone and not the sun, it's easy to feel detached.
Yeah.
If you can't remember the last time you stepped in a lake or the sea, you feel detached. You get your water from a tap, God knows what's in that. So I can understand why it's difficult for people to grasp their how they can make a difference. Any final words, Peadar, in terms of what? Yeah, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, right. Well, I suppose the important, and any change we make as an individual it's meaningless, but the whole idea is that you make changes because you look at your lifestyle and the way you lead your life and how you interact with the environment and how you interact with people in your own local community. And if you can make one small change, that, as I said, on its own will have no meaning or no meaningful purpose. But that one change can lead on to another change, can lead on to another change, onto a bigger change. It can inspire someone, a friend, someone in your family to, make changes themselves. If we're waiting for things to happen at a political level, we may as well just turn the lights off now. Bring about the changes that you want to see in your local community, because that is where you can have an effect. And we're facing disaster. What is ahead of us is disaster for all following generations. And it can when you look at it on a grand scale and you see ice caps melting, you hear about 500 species of animals going extinct this year. It can be so overwhelming, but the power of each and every individual is so strong, and it's up to us as individuals to bring about the change that we want to see, or be prepared to look future generations in the eye and just say, couldn't be arsed.
Yeah, that is one thing that I think, like, if I'm ever, if I get to 80 years old, if my grandson or a young person asks me, what did you do? And I said nothing.
Yeah, you see, the thing is, we have the information. In generations gone by, people could hold up their hands and say, well, didn't know anything about that. Climate change, what?
Yeah.
We know it's there. We know it's real, and future generations won't forgive us. Like when I look back at my parents, who came into adulthood in the 60s, I've often wondered why they didn't bring about, like, when there was a huge mood for change and, it looked as if the 60s was going to be the decade where everything changed radically, and then it didn't. I've always looked at my parents and asked them, why didn't you change things? So I don't want to be in that position where my children look at me and ask the same question,
Yeah. Okay, Peadar. Well, you're not on social media. You're not personally yourself on Instagram anyway, but you have smallchanges.ie, and you also have the Instagram smallchanges.ie. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're opening a new branch. A new,
yeah. Well, it'll be a different. It'll be more along, say, a cafe.
Yeah,
side of things,
which is great for community.
Absolutely.
So people can go down. It's opening soon.
Yeah.
People can go down and they can get their groceries, but also they can get a bit of grub, like sit in.
Yeah, and it's the I picked the location for the same reason why I originally picked Drumcondra, was that I felt that there wasn't I felt that there was a huge need for a community, a central point for the community to interact and engage.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Well, I'm delighted. So I can just try over there. That'd be brilliant. So that's it. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kev.
Thank you so much for listening. This podcast has been brought to you by Apparel, men's clothing that want to encourage more fellas to do yoga and to move on and off the mat. All their products are made from sustainable recycled fabrics. Even their packaging is made from recycled paper. If you go to om.com/#TYLP and you put in the promo code Kevin at checkout, you'll get 15% off your eco activewear. So that's ohmme.com/#TYLP, promo code Kevin for a whopping 15% off. And finally, Small Changes. They're the other sponsor for this podcast. They are, well, you know about them now, I hope. If you're in Dublin, you find yourself in the Drumcondra or Glasnevin area, go and check them out. Bring your refillable cup and you can get yourself 50% off a cup of cha. Lastly, if you're listening before May 25th, I have my handstand workshop in Yoga Hub, Castle Knock. There are 7 spaces available, 23 people have booked in already. So if you go to kevinboyleyoga.ie, go to the events and retreats page there, you can get in touch with me and you ask any questions that you may have. I'll hook you up with a booking. Go to that page anyway, if it's even after May 25th, because that's where I put all the stuff that is happening, events, retreats, that type of jazz. Thank you so much for your time, and if you have any questions, comments, please let me know. If you enjoy this podcast, I'd really appreciate if you shared it with your friends on Instagram stories. Look after yourself. Catch up with you next week.